It's the Brad and John Show.
It is the Brad and John Show. I am Brad. He's John. Good morning, John.
Good morning, Brad. How are you?
I am, best day of my life. How's that? How's that for being good? Best day of my life. John is the guy who puts, by the way, I should say right up at the top of the show here, matter of fact, this is, I was going to say December. No, that's last month. January 3rd, this is the Friday of the first week of 2025. This is the A block, which means we start pretty much right at the top of the hour. And John, you're the financial guy. Can you tell me what the in the futures market, what bread and milk are going for? Are the futures way up on bread and milk right now?
Well, that's a great question. First of all, when you started that sentence, I didn't know where you were going. Do you know from a call I was on yesterday, Brad, I believe milk is up 26% in the last 3 months?
Well, I was curious because of the fact, if you listen to the forecast, depending upon who you listen to, we're going to have anywhere from 2 to 2,000 inches of snow Saturday night into Sunday morning. And you know how it is. Already I'm seeing activity on the social media. Oh, got to go to Schnucks to get bread and milk. Oh, my God. Or, excuse me.
I know it. You know what? The weather and Snowmageddon was almost in the top 3 until like 30 minutes ago, Brad.
Oh, it got
But then
bounced.
I thought, listen, we've had enough of Brad promising people how many inches they're going to get.
John, okay, that's John Combest. He's the guy that puts together this incredible website for the past 23 years, has not missed one single day, every single morning. He puts it online. It's like a Drudge Report of the state of Missouri, all sorts of interesting links. And, I have to tell you, John, there are days when the Brad and John Show plays heavily into the number of links that are on there. Are we that interesting, or is that just nepotism because of the fact that you're part of the show?
It's neither. It's the fact that this time of year, before folks go back to Jeff City, in between Christmas and in between New Year's, people are trying to detox from politics a little bit before they go overindulge on January 8th. So, yeah, we make up a significant part of the mind share. And also, Brad, I linked to so many other radio shows that seem to just be napping between Christmas and New Year. So I can't help it. To quote the great, well, actually, he's still alive. To quote the great Jimmy Garvin, we can't help it. We're this good, Brad.
Hey, John, can I ask you a question? You listen to 93.3. You listen to Tracy and Rick's station. Are they all on vacation? Hold down or whatever. I mean, is it all temporary people or best of shows? Are they actually going live over there the last 2 weeks or so?
No, the last few days. I know that, like, for example, Ryan Haidt was on. I believe Ryan was on Christmas Eve. They had a Christmas Eve show, and I believe the morning show was back. They took off the same days I think we took off. We took off Christmas Eve.
Right.
Yeah. So anyway, I believe they've kept it going.
Well, my hat's off to them because I'm tired of all the national shows that are like, and most of them, even our radio station here, we have 3 syndicated shows. We have Armstrong and Getty that comes off on after us between 8 and midnight, 8 and noon. And by the way, the best of shows they've done, they did this thing on, I guess it was New Year's Eve, or no, I think it was their last show of the year, which would have been the 20th, the Monday before Christmas. And they did, every Friday they do this thing, and they'll do it today, called the Cut of the Week, which is like a sound bite, which are all mostly very funny sound bites. They did 4 hours of the cut of the year, and they started in January. It was really interesting because it was like the entire year telescoped into 4 hours. It got to the point where I think I listened to most of the 4 hours, even to the point where I was here around in the studio for a while, and then when I was out and around, I was streaming the studio or streaming the station on my phone. It was so funny. And what's interesting about it is you go back in January and February, and this is when Biden is still, I'm going to be the next president, and everything about Trump is negative. Everything, all the different quotes about him. He did this, he did that. And it's so funny because after the election, it just like all stopped. Do you know what I'm saying? We remember I think probably the most interesting thing was we had the Morning Joe crew. We had Joe and what's her name? Nina, what's her name?
Mika.
Mika, who took a trip down to Mar-a-Lago to kiss the ring. I'm going like, and remember, he's the guy with the famous quote, like where he says, this Joe Biden's the best Joe Biden ever. And if you don't believe he's the best president we're ever going to have for the next term, F you. Remember that?
And then he used an AI-generated image of Joe Biden doing a back handspring. Yes. He learned that at Olympia Gymnastics. Now, my favorite thing about Armstrong and Getty is because they're so responsive to listeners, they're starting Friday's show with the Barbershop Quartet.
Oh, my God.
That's my favorite thing. And they're going to do that in B Block today, Brad. That's what I heard.
Well, you know what, John?
But that's only after they, at 7:07, get into the top 3 things.
You know what, John?
Voices blending, melodies ascending, harmony in the air. Our songs are never ending. In the barbershop we create magic. Brad and John show, yeah. It's pure classic. No instruments needed, just our vocal range. Notes flying high, it's our musical exchange. Tracy's station may try, but they can't compete. Our barbershop style, it can't be beat. Oh, the harmony of voices, so sweet. In the barbershop of life, our tunes will repeat. No need for instruments, no need for a band. Just the Brad and John show, the finest in the land.
John, I'm so sorry. I have to admit to you that I was so focused on when I get off the air here at 8 o'clock with you going to Rehoboth. How do you say that? Where's the beach that Biden hangs out on? Rehoboth?
Let's just call it Hoboken. That's better.
And then after I get done, say it again. I got a mental block with it now. Rehoboth?
Hoboken.
No. Hoboken.
I don't know what the name of the beach he actually goes to is.
Okay, and then it's like this last week. He goes from the beach in Rehoboth, then he goes to St. Croix, and then if he's not had enough vacation, he goes to Camp David. Does the guy ever work? But you know who works all the time?
Time for the John Combest Top 3.
A guy who never takes a day off, who is always there. It's John Combest and the Top 3. And what do? We start this show off with this guy right here.
I'm Casey Kasem.
And what does he do?
In third place,
Brad, get your smartphone apps ready, because in a delightful follow-up to something we discussed 2 weeks ago, sports betting may roll out earlier than anticipated in the state of Missouri. This story is brought to us by a site called sportsbettingdime.com. And I kicked the tires. I clicked around for a while, and it turns out this is a legitimate news organization. Now, you won't find this story, of course, in any traditional mainstream Missouri publication, because this requires a little bit of work around the holidays. But this gentleman, a guy named Robert Linehan, spoke to the Missouri Gaming Commission Chairman Jan Zimmerman, who is relaying, Brad, that early work on the regulatory aspect of sports betting has gone faster than anticipated. And as you and I discussed 2 weeks ago, they're really just looking at what other states have done, incorporating some of those best practices, and trying to get this through quickly. Now, there is a hard deadline. They have to get the sports betting infrastructure up and running by the end of this year, by December 31st, 2025. Originally, in setting expectations, the Gaming Commission said, hey, we hope to have everything up mid to late summer. But they've been moving so quickly, Brad, that they are now confident in saying that they anticipate that sports betting could be available to consumers by early summer. So if you're a FanDuel guy, you're a DraftKings guy, this is great news, Brad. This is finally a government entity moving ahead of schedule.
Well, we talked about this, that the other states which have had similar rollouts, they got way ahead of themselves, because you can't miss the end of the Major League Baseball series and the beginning of, actually all the sports, hockey, football, and basketball, which all essentially start in August, September, October, in through that window. So that's why they're going to hurry. They're not going to dawdle, one of my favorite words. They're going to get this thing cranked out. But you say by early summer, so that would be like June, July type time, something like that?
And so what I learned from the story is that most of the headache, or I should say most of the headaches, hassles, and horse blank that you have to go through have to do with actually giving the licenses, filling out the licenses, making sure every employee has the right, the right qualifications, background check. Here's what you'll be most interested in, Brad. We won't spend too much time on this, but folks can find the piece on my website. Here's who gets a license. So here's what you had been drilling down on all summer. It'll allow each Missouri professional sports franchise and the land-based casino, whatever that means, to be eligible for one retail sports betting license and one online sports betting license each. And then every team and casino will also be able to partner up with one online sports bettor. So folks can dive into the details here. I don't know if we need to get into the minutia of what exactly that means for land-based casino and such, but good news if you're a sports bettor, Brad.
Well, can I ask you a weird question?
Sure.
Does that mean the Hoots get a because they're the professional baseball team out in O'Fallon? Does that mean the Springfield Cardinals get a license? Do all these, like the St. Louis Ambush, get a license?
I think so. I think it means that the Northside Youth Association, right off there off Columbia Bottoms Road, and also Surrey Lane has been cleared for a license as well, Brad. But you know who has been cleared for licenses? Everybody in story number 2.
And that would be?
Up a notch to number 2.
We got a double header. If you just can't get enough of Scott Faughn and the shows he does, he had at least a double header yesterday, Brad. He was on Pete Mundo's show in Kansas City. Shout out to Pete Mundo. Talking about Kansas City's growing influence in state government, including in the legislature. The speaker-to-be, John Patterson, is from Lee's Summit, and Kansas City has really been flexing over the last few years. A lot of momentum has been going that way. So Scott broke it down in a pretty quick 8 to 10 minute interview over there. But perhaps most importantly, Scott had a year-end awards show, giving awards to Legislator of the Year, giving awards to Legislation of the Year. He had a guest named Erin Shrimpfen. She is a Democrat lobbyist. She's from mid-Missouri. She used to work for Quentin Lucas, the Democrat mayor over in Kansas City. Anyway, gave out some awards. Scott gave out some awards. He got a lot of input from viewers and from listeners. A couple friends of the show won awards, Brad. Thanks to another listener of the show, thanks to another friend of the show, Scott had an award called Fashion Plate of the Year. And the original winner of that was our friend Greg Keller. And then a friend of our show and a listener to our show, Mary Hill, who's from the western part of the state, Clay County, she sent a note to Scott and said, whoa, you need to have a female fashion plate of the year too. And that is Casey Burns. So 2 friends of the show, Brad, won awards from This Week in Missouri Politics.
And they wouldn't have done it without us, right? That's all there is to it.
Oh, let's take all the credit for it, Brad. So I don't have exact timestamps up to every award piece today, but I'll have that up a little bit later this morning. I do have a link up and some rough categorization there on the website today.
Interesting you should mention that, because many, many, many times in me talking about my Westplex Chamber of Commerce, I talk about the fact that the Westplex is, if you take all the communities of the Westplex, the 8 main communities, St. Charles, St. Peter's, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, you have the 47th largest city in the country. And what a lot of people don't realize is if the city of St. Louis keeps losing population, it could very easily drop out of the top 100. Is that unbelievable or what? And
and it's very sad. Like we don't think about it in human terms, but it is pretty sad, Brad.
And Kansas City is now has been for almost a decade now the largest city in the state of Missouri. And a lot of people go, oh, no, it's St. Louis. If you look at the metro, St. Louis is larger. But if you look at the city by city, it's Kansas City, which is the largest city in the state of Missouri, which is sort of bizarre. But anyway, that's a whole other story. Okay, and last but not least,
the number 1
little ditty about Frank and Joe. It involves a job, but thankfully not a blow. Frank was leading McClure North High till he told Joe, "Get your hand off my thigh." Brad, have you been following any news from the Ferguson-Florissant School District lately?
No, John, I haven't. And matter of fact, I think I sort of avoid that because it can't be positive. And I'm not saying anything bad about Ferguson-Florissant, but it's one of those school districts that you go like, here we go again. You know what I'm saying?
There can be some of that, and it's a bordering school district to our home school district, the Hazelwood School District. Much love for Ferguson-Florissant. Now, Brad, we're going to use the word we'll try not to overuse the word allegedly here, but let's talk about some allegations in court. There's a gentleman named Frank Williams, and he was principal at McClure North High School, which is in the Ferguson-Florissant school district. And he had done a great job, supposedly, according to all of his district recommendations and awards. He had been the principal at Cross Keys Middle School. And then he ascended to being principal of McClure North High. And he was on his way, according to him, to being an assistant superintendent. But then there's a guy named Joe. And Joe, according to Frank, maybe started to fancy Frank a little bit, allegedly. And they had a few charged conversations, according to Frank Williams. And at one point, Brad, Joe Davis put his hand on Frank's thigh. Now, this made Frank uncomfortable. There was somebody else even in the room at the time that this happened. And Frank didn't handle it well. When a guy touches his thigh, allegedly, Frank was like, whoa, we're not that kind of friends or colleagues. Then when it came time for Frank to get promoted, for Frank to get an assistant superintendent job, Joe was one of the people that said, no way. Frank is alleging that by turning down an unwanted advance from Joe, he did not get that promotion that he so richly deserved. And Brad, the funny/unfunny thing, to add insult to injury, the interim principal of McClure North, the guy that replaced good old Frank, an African-American fellow, the guy that replaced him was a white boy, a guy named Curtis Downing. Now, Frank is suing Ferguson-Florissant not only for harassment, but also for racial discrimination. You can't get rid of Frank for turning down some allegedly same-sex thigh-touching and replace him with a white boy. That's not cool, Brad. So let's point out the fact that nothing has been proven. This is just an allegation. And Frank wants at least, Brad, $25,000 because he was earned that promotion, and you should never go to work and have another man touch your thigh.
So what's the source on this story? Is this in the Post-Dispatch, or where did this come from?
This is in the Post-Dispatch. Yeah, now I declined to link. This is Dana Reek, R-I-E-C-K, wrote this piece. I declined to link the other stories that have covered this because most of it was a general regurgitation, it appeared, of what had already appeared in the Post-Dispatch. There was nothing new in those stories. Now, I did go read the actual case, Brad. I went and read the actual lawsuit. To me, the most interesting nugget is that at one point, Joe called Frank, because Joe, during the day, he was getting his car worked on. He was getting a new stereo put in at Best Buy. And he called his buddy Frank, said, Frank, I need a ride. Frank went and picked him up. And then Joe said, Frank, let's go have a meal together. And Brad, allegedly, that's when the alleged inappropriate behavior and advances began.
You know what, John? I have to admit to you, I'm a little bit curious of your choice of stories here, because I'm looking at the stlpr.org website and I don't see anything about this story.
Well, you also want, let me pause here too. It's very rare that I put a story in the top 3 that's not on johncombest.com. And this story doesn't involve Missouri politics or Missouri on the federal level. But Brad, this is a school district. We have a lot of people, I shouldn't say a lot. We have a handful of people from Ferg-Flor who regularly listen to our show. And you and I grew up adjacent to this district. And let's face it, who isn't at least a little bit turned off or perturbed, or maybe turned on, we're not ones to judge, by the idea of a guy that's a principal or a superintendent, like doing some, thigh touching with another dude.
Yeah,
like,
but wouldn't this?
I mean, I don't think the workplace is the place for that.
Wouldn't this be the number one story on STLPR? Because this is all they talk about. I mean.
Yeah. I mean, it has everything. It has, Brad. You know that the key word for that is intersectionality. Because maybe if you're a black man and you can't freely express your same-sex desires, maybe you need to get that out in the workplace, Brad. I think you should send a message to one of the 34 people in the newsroom at St. Louis Public Radio and see if they'll cover it. I mean, Jason Rosenbaum is busy doing anything else besides covering intersectionality. Let's face it.
Jason Rosenbaum, who is the poster child of the 95-5 rule, which means 95% of the news staff at KWMU St. Louis PR does 5% of the production, whereas Jason, who's only 5% of the news force there at St. Louis Public Radio, he does 95% of the content. That's the 95-5 rule. If you heard of the 80-20 rule, it's even more tilted toward a guy by the name of Jason Rosenbaum, who doesn't like me anymore, but that's a whole nother story. Okay.
I love when you tease up imaginary vendettas, Brad. Imaginary hurt.
We have to take a break.